everyone and welcome back to my channel. So before we get into today's video, can I please have some comments about whether this setup is working for you? I think I've figured out my lighting. It's a little bit tricky because this side of my room is very dark. My bed's in front of my window, so I can't really film that way, even though the light would be nicer. There's also, you know, it's messy that side. There's boxes everywhere still. So do let me know. I think this is kind of going to be my filming area. For those of you who haven't met him, this is Preston, the plastic plant, named lovingly by my friend Holly of Herpetology Holly on Instagram. She's a gem. Go and follow her. I'll leave her handles and stuff down here. She has many a beautiful reptile. And she's a wonderful human being as well. So shout out to her. So today we are going to be discussing a few hints and tips on how to get your bearded dragon to eat their greens. The first thing I'm going to discuss with you is kind of breaking down the necessities for the age ranges of bearded dragons, because babies do require different nutrition than adults do, and some people find that this is kind of the hard, tricky bit. And then I'm going to get into a few kind of tips and tricks on how to trick your bearded dragon into eating their greens, basically. First of all, your baby beardie is going to be eating 70 to 80% live food, maybe even a little bit higher than that. Generally speaking, babies need more protein, and so you will be focusing their diet on feeder insects. You should have a really decent staple. Something like dubia roaches is probably what I would recommend personally. I find that they are the most nutritious of the feeder insects. Then mixing in things like locusts, crickets, waxworms as treats, you know, other live feeders that you have available to you. I also think that offering some form of kind of fruit, veg and greens is a good idea for babies, but because their diet is prominently going to be protein based, this is really not something that I would expect them to be hugely interested in. Although in my experience of Gary as a baby, anything that he hadn't seen before, he wanted to touch with his tongue, so it worked out quite nicely. At the 12-month mark, having already exposed your baby beardie to things like fruit, veg and greens, it's a really good idea to start transitioning them over to only having insects maybe 3 times a week-ish, give or take, and living on a diet of predominantly plant matter. Now, your salads should consist of a base green and then some kind of sort of colourful extras and things on top that are providing a range of kind of other vitamins and minerals, and then of course you can supplement with a calcium and a vitamin powder, both of which I have touched on in a previous video, what to feed your beardie. I will link that up here for you guys so you have somewhere else. Also contained in the description box, as with that other video, I always like to leave some really helpful links for you, so if you are not sure whether your bearded dragon is able to eat certain things or how to prepare it for them, because some things do need the rind removed, then I leave a couple of really helpful links down for you below so that you can check things yourself before you give them to your dragon, because if you are unsure, you should always be checking. So as discussed, babies need to be having a diet predominantly protein based, and your adult bearded dragons need to be on a diet that is predominantly plant matter. Now, some of you may find that your young adult bearded dragons are not so keen on going from moving things that they can chase around, that taste really yummy, and that wiggle around for them to attract their attention, to something that's green and a bit boring looking. So now we're going to get into the hints and tips and tricks that you can use to get your bearded dragon to be more inclined to eat their salad for you. The first thing that I want to discuss is something that if you haven't done it already and your bearded dragon is an adult, you kind of have just missed the boat. But if you are raising a bearded dragon and you've got them from like a hatchling or a baby or whatever, the best thing that I can suggest to you to kind of stand you in good stead is to make sure that you are exposing them to salads, fruits and veggies before they reach adulthood. You should be kind of offering this anyway occasionally, because you know they are going to be less interested in it, but they do need a little bit of plant matter as babies anyway. However, I feel like the more you expose them to these things that they can eat, the more likely it is going to be easier for them to transition when they do hit adulthood and plant matter becomes the kind of base and foundation of their diet. The sooner you can expose them to things that are not just live food, the easier job you're going to create for yourself later. It's kind of similar to, you know, having kids and exposing them to as many different kinds of food and stuff as early on as you can, and getting them interested in vegetables and all of that kind of stuff is really good, and it will kind of stand you in good stead for later. So that is the first tip that I can give you. The next tip that I have for you is making sure that your salads look appetizing. So when I'm creating a salad, Gary is kind of less picky, but I don't just chuck a load of greens in there and expect him to be really interested in it. I am going to do a different video on a week's worth of bearded dragon salads, just to give you an idea and some examples of how you can mix it up for your bearded dragons, because I feel like it's always interesting to see what other people are feeding their beardies, and I feel like we can definitely learn from each other. Keep a lookout for that video that will be coming up really soon. But when I'm creating a salad for Gary, I always put a base of greens in there, whether that be some cauliflower greens or some spring greens that he's been kind of into lately, or some rocket or arugula if you're in the US. I then make sure that I've got a couple of different kind of fruit items or veg items to put on top. Obviously be wary of things with a really high acidity or anything like that. That was covered in the video that I will link up here for you about what you can and can't feed your dragon. As I said, look down in the links as well if you're unsure of stuff that you can or can't feed. So I always like to put a little bit of colour in there, and I find that bearded dragons in particular really appreciate things that are more brightly coloured. So things like raspberries, strawberries, red pepper, orange pepper, some yellow in there maybe as well. And I find that putting a couple of different fruit or veg in there, cut up kind of small and sprinkled on top, kind of grabs their attention. I feel like, again, just like with children, you know, you bung something that's green in front of them and they're like, I'm not touching that, thanks. If it has a little bit more colour and it looks a little bit more interesting or exciting to them, then it's a little bit more enticing to eat. To be honest, if someone gave me a salad and it was just leaves, I'd be like, nah mate, not today. So I kind of get it. You would want some kind of like maybe nuts and seeds and a nice dressing on top. It's kind of the same for these guys. Make it a little bit more interesting, make it a little bit more colourful, and switch it up so they have some variety as well. Not only is that going to provide a wide range of nutritional benefit for them, but it's also just going to keep them interested in what they're eating. The next tip I have for you guys is to tongue feed. Not only is this a really good way to bond with your bearded dragon, it is a brilliant way for you to make sure that they are eating certain things and also entice them to eat. I find that sometimes if Gary is having a really funny time and he's not kind of going to his salad of his own accord and he just is like, no mum, I'm not having it, then a really good way to get him to eat it is to take my tongs. You can pick up some plastic ones or bamboo ones, whatever you feel comfortable using, from eBay or Amazon or your local kind of pet or reptile store. And it's something that you know, you don't need a million pairs of. You can just keep the one forever as long as you look after it and you don't lose it like me. Kind of pick up the salad in the bowl, drag it around, maybe hold it in front of him, like wiggle it along the ground and stuff. And I feel like having a little bit of movement in the salad kind of entices him. Obviously, if you've got loose substrate or anything like that, then do be aware of like dragging it across the floor and things. But a little wiggle above his head or something where he's like, oh, what's this? And maybe he thinks it's a bug or something, is going to entice them to eat it. Especially when they're much younger and you're just getting them used to eating predominantly plant matter, they're going to be used to chasing things around or things that move. You know, picking up your leaves with your tongs and stuff and kind of wiggling it around near them is going to entice them more to eat them and kind of promote the reaction that they would have if it was live food. I also feel like, as I said before, this is a really good way to bond with your dragon, and especially if you have been feeding live food from tongs as well, they're gonna have that association that the tongs mean food, means reward, is something good that they enjoy, and that's something that should kind of stand you in good stead as well. Next tip I have for you is to mix some live food in with their salad. This is kind of a form of trickery, but you know, as a lizard mom, you kind of have to do what you kind of have to do. If you've got a really picky bearded dragon, or they're just like not that fussed about it because, as I said, the transition's been kind of tricky, or indeed you've got an adult like Gaz and you are finding it like really hard to get the salad in because they've suddenly gone off it for some unknown reason, because they're a princess, I don't know. I obviously am not bitter about this at all. We're not having a hard time right now, it's fine. Then I suggest putting some smaller bugs on top of the salad. So after you've got your nice green base, you put a little bit of colour on there. If you're really struggling, another thing that you can do is take something like a waxworm or mealworms. Obviously just be wary of, you know, overfeeding these kinds of feeder insects. Maybe a couple of roaches dusted on top would be a better option for you. And you can put some form of live food on top of the salad that will wiggle around and entice them to come and eat it. Now, sometimes this will just get them interested in it and they'll go for the bugs and the salad and they will eat it all up. And sometimes, as I said, it is kind of just a form of trickery and they will go for the bug and just accidentally get a mouthful of salad, which frankly is just as good and fine by me. If the salad's getting in there somehow, then that's only got to be a good thing. This method I feel is especially good for beardies that have suddenly gone off their salad, or beardies that are kind of predominantly used to eating only live food, so like mainly like the babies. The next tip I have for you is kind of turning it into a game. If you have a clean, chemical-free, safe, non-fluffy area in your house where there is like a wooden floor or something that you can clean up using no chemicals, etc, etc, and it is completely bearded dragon safe, and you are supervising your dragon, only is this kind of fun for you, but it's also fun for them to be able to chase things around, I suggest making a nice little safe area for you and your playmate to go and chill. And what you can do is take a variety of little bits of food and stuff that you've cut up that are dragon safe, greens included, peas, stuff like that, and you can kind of roll it across the floor for them and watch them chase it around and eat it. Again, it's a movement thing. This is obviously not something you're going to do all the time, but it might just encourage them, you know, to be a little bit more interested in things that are green, and try a few different kind of fruits and veggies if they're really reluctant to of their own accord and they won't take anything off the tong. Anything that moves is going to spark their curiosity and really kind of entice them to eat it, put it in their mouth, taste it, want to know what it is. So that is kind of the key here. You may have noticed this theme with stuff we're talking about is kind of movement. So I find making a little dragon safe area for you and your buddy and throwing around a few different foods that they can kind of, you know, chase across the floor and stuff is quite fun, and gets them to try a variety of different foods. Obviously, do bear in mind you need to be supervising your dragon at all times. Don't have other things out with your dragon like your cat or your dog, or, you know, these guys get predated on by other bigger things in the wild, and that's going to be a stressful and potentially disastrous encounter for your beardie. So just be sensible, keep it to you and your beardie, make sure the floor is clean, don't use any chemicals, and don't be doing it on carpet where they can get their like claws caught in it and pick up fluff in their mouths and stuff like that. Just be sensible. The next tip that I suggest to you guys is using bee pollen. For some reason these guys absolutely love it. Now obviously you need to make sure that the bee pollen you are buying is appropriate to use for your bearded dragon. Normally it does come in a kind of grain form. You will need to mash this up with the back of a spoon or something like that on a little plate, and just make sure that you are kind of turning it into more of a powder rather than the little kind of granules as it comes. It's really important to do that. And this can be sprinkled on top of their salads and their veggies and stuff, and they absolutely love it. Don't ask me why, but it's really good for them. It's really nutritious for them. It's really good for us as well. And it's just one more trick up your sleeve that might entice them to eat their salad. So those would be my top tips for a finicky bearded dragon, or indeed a baby one that you are trying to get to eat more greens. Just do be aware that if you are new or you are going through a little patch where your beardie is maybe being a little bit more finicky and you're a little bit worried, try not to panic. Most of the time, these guys are not going to starve themselves. They're just being a pain in the butt. Obviously do watch out for signs that if they are not eating and you don't see any of their food disappearing from their bowl, or they are losing a significant amount of weight, then that is obviously something that you need to pursue some kind of veterinary care for, just to get them checked over. But if your bearded dragon is acting normally, they're not losing any weight, you are seeing maybe a few leaves disappearing and they're still interested in their live food and stuff, then don't concern yourself, don't panic. This is a very normal, common issue that we all have, because basically they would rather have a bug, and that is, to be honest, the crux of it 99% of the time. So as a new beardie owner especially, it can be a little bit jarring to be thinking that you should be doing something and your animal is just not doing it. But you know, these guys aren't going to starve themselves, they're just trying to see what they can get away with, like children. So I hope that you found this video really helpful. If I've left off any hints and tips that you guys have tried and it has worked, then please do leave them down below, because obviously it's really good to learn from each other, and I like to learn from you guys just as much as I like to try and help you guys out as well. Don't forget to check out my other videos. There is a whole load on here for you, and there'll be many more coming up in the lead up to Christmas. Don't forget to check out that video on what you can and can't feed your bearded dragon. Links and stuff down below for anything you're unsure of are always in the description box for you. You should always be checking these things as well, and that video that I'm going to link up here for you also contains a little bit about supplementation as well, which is also really important to keep your beardies healthy. These hints and tips also do work for some other reptiles too, so if you have skinks, things like that, you might want to try these also. Hit the subscribe button if you're not part of the Janes family, we would love to have you here. Hit that thumbs up button if you've enjoyed the video and found it really helpful, and feel free to check out my main channel, which is where I do all of my kind of beauty stuff. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. It's goodbye from me and the big man. Bye!